Early Breakfast with Rosie Wright on Times Radio. 17 minutes past 5. The front page of the Times has the pictures here of teenage sisters among the Britons missing in Gaza. It's Yahel and Noelia. Their kibbutz was raided. Their father's also missing and their mother was murdered. We were hearing yesterday from Rishi Sunak confirming yesterday at least 6 British citizens were killed in Hamas's attacks. 10 people are missing. They are, of course, tragic stories, and their whereabouts, as we've just been hearing from Jotam, very difficult to establish and to sort of fact check any information that we're getting out of Gaza. The Daily Telegraph also has the story of the British girls missing after the Hamas terrorist attack. There is a very, very sad photograph of a lady mourning someone who's been covered by the Israel flag. The other story that much closer to home in Brussels, there's a suspected terrorist in Brussels who opened fire. 2 people were killed last night. We'll hear a little bit more in the sports news later on. You know, Belgium are hosting Sweden in the Euro 2024 qualifying match. It is 2 football fans, Swedish football fans, we believe, who've been shot dead in Brussels by a gunman who remained on the run. Cara will keep us up to date with the developing news out of Brussels this morning. And finally, the Daily Mail says violent prisoners to be let out early. We sort of had some of these announcements trailed yesterday, and we heard from the Justice Minister about how to relieve pressure on the prison population. Let's look at these stories in a bit more detail. Andrew Eborn, barrister, broadcaster, Futurist, joins me on the line. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning, Rosie. And always a sad day, actually, isn't it? Every day we're waking up to more and more horrors coming out of Gaza. And my heart goes out to victims on both sides of that. And they always say in war, the first casualty is the truth. And as you rightly pointed out, we don't get a number of unconfirmed reports, but they are absolutely shocking. And one of the shocking things as well is when it starts to hit us right here at our home. As you know, I live in Regent's Park and the BBC is just around the corner. And at the weekend, the BBC was covered in red paint. And you've got the shock now of the Times are reporting that 2 Jewish schools in North London have been vandalised with red paint, which is obviously sending shockwaves through the local community.
Suella Braverman last week sort of urged the police really to say, please use public order offences and hate crime legislation to arrest people who are chanting anti-Israel sentiments. How do you think we're handling this, Andrew? Because people want to be able to air their views. Hate crimes, though, obviously need to be policed. Those people need to be arrested and dealt with swiftly. We can't have, children being worried about going to school, being told not to wear their uniform, or in this case, it's these 2 schools that have been vandalised.
No, you're absolutely right. And what's happened is the toxicity that we have in social media is hitting the streets now, as we saw at the weekend. And it's incredibly sad because we have different communities which have got on very, very peacefully, but people are now basically being forced to take sides. And it's so important to emphasize that sort of not all Palestinians are Hamas and so on and so forth. And I think what's happening is all that's happening with social media is it's sort of whipping people into this frenzy so that you have to sort of basically take a side and protesting accordingly. At the end of all these stories, there are human lives which are really devastated as a result of it. And people forget it's only when you personify terror and these sort of situations where you have these horrible, horrible pictures coming out that you can understand just how devastating it is from a human point of view.
Yeah, of course. And Jotam sort of explained to us earlier just the complexity of just trying to clarify what is actually going on. Obviously, as the situation worsens in Gaza, where people are low on things like electricity, the basics of things like having a phone charge to be able to be in contact with people is getting even more complex. Should we move on to stories a bit closer to home, Andrew? In the front page of the Daily Mail, violent prisoners to be let out early. Hundreds of offenders have had their sentences cut by it's about 18 days. The Mail says that this is happening under a Tory government. It does seem surprising.
Well, it does seem surprising, and some of the papers have got the sort of headlines slightly wrong. In the Daily Telegraph, I think they talk about jail terms of less than a year will be slashed or got rid of for most offenders. Well, the reality is that less than a year, what's going to happen is if it's minor offences, then they're going to try and say, let's do it in the community so that you basically can do that sort of size. And it's important to think about what the sentencing is for. There's sort of three main sides when judges are doing sentencing. One is to basically act as a deterrent so that people don't do it again. The other is to obviously help with rehabilitation of offenders. And the third aspect is the protection of the community. So you need to look at those sort of things. And rather than scaring people and turning around and saying, look, hang on, we're going to have all these violent people let out, the reality is they're saying that where it's less than a year, they're going to try and, as I say, put them in the community. They might have tags and various restrictions and curfews and so on and so forth. But they're saying that this would not include, and it's important to note, it would not include sex, violent or terror offences. And I think that's what we need to sort of look at, put it into perspective, and as always, shine more light and less heat on the situation. Jails are at capacity. 88,225, and there's only 557 places left of our 120 jails in England and Wales. And this is a record high. Previously, it was 88,179. After the riots in 2011. So it just shows you what has been happening at the moment in jails.
Yeah. Andrew, at the same time, when we look at this story, though, someone who's been convicted of shoplifting, maybe a judge has given them a 6-month sentence. I think that's probably the longest time you might be sentenced to prison for a crime like that. Is it a problem that the government are saying, well, actually, no, we're now not going to send you to prison? Not because we've reviewed these sentences and we think they're inappropriate. Actually, we'll give you a community order because we just actually don't have the space to send you to prison.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And if that is the only reason, then that's clearly wrong. We need to look at it. If the whole sort of system, and it's important to note that if somebody gets a suspended sentence, it's still a sentence, and if they commit again, then they go back and will have that sentence enforced. So the reality is, you're right, if the only reason these things are happening is because we simply don't have the space, then that's an issue. If we're trying to look at ways of making it a more efficient system, but still looking at those three elements, say, the deterrent, rehabilitation and protection of the community, make sure those sort of factors are in place, then that's a better way of looking at it.
And there's quite a lot of international news, political news. The first one is Donald Trump. You think his legal calendar is quite busy right now with where he needs to be, giving evidence at which court. He's going to be in London. He's preparing to give evidence at the High Court to deny hiring prostitutes, holding sex parties and bribing Russian officials. This, you can help us sort of understand the legal case here. This isn't really about a defamation case, is it? He's trying to claim that sort of his data wasn't looked after properly, and that's the only way he can try and, I guess, clear his name. Can you explain sort of what's going on?
Well, I think anybody trying to unpack Donald Trump would come across a very interesting situation. I mean, fact is indeed much, much stranger than fiction as far as Donald's concerned, and it would make a tremendous movie. I mean, he is the most extraordinary chap, and he is keeping the sort of poster boy, if you like, for the legal profession, because he's keeping lawyers around the world very, very busy. But basically, as you say, he's preparing to give evidence about data protection, which he says his data should not have been released. He's denying all these accusations which have been bandied around about hiring prostitutes and holding sex parties and soiling, as you say, the bed of the Obamas and things like that. And that's what's going to happen. They're going to look at this in court. His barrister, Hugh Tomlinson, claims that basically he broke Orbis broke data protection laws, as the information in the dossier was not processed fairly or lawfully and was inaccurate. So all of this will come out in court. You're going to get, probably on the inside pages, obviously, basically lots of this will come out with the accusations being repeated and so on and so forth, and the suggestion about data protection. But data is, as I mentioned many times before, is that data is the new currency. It's what we so flippantly give away whenever we sign up to terms and conditions on various software packages. But it's really, really important to make sure that we preserve the rights to our privacy and to our data and so on and so forth. There's a wonderful series called Black Mirror, and basically something called I Hate Joan, or Joan is Awful. And it's all about somebody, Joan, this character, who signed up to a streaming service called Streambury. And in the terms and conditions, she gave away all the rights to her life and so on and so forth. And the next thing she saw was her life being played out on screen. So it's a wonderful warning, if you like, as to make sure that your data is protected. But this is what Trump is saying. He's saying that breached his rights and these sort of stuff. So he's going to work on that basis and attack these various accusations. But expect much more, and I'm sure next time I join you, I'll be able to unpack even more on it.
Yeah. His claim, basically, is that the dossier that was released, you may well remember it, Christopher Steele's, the former MI6 officer's dossier of alleged Russian interference into his election victory. Trump is claiming that that included a string of inaccurate information that breached data protection laws. Then what happened is some journalists got hold of it and published it. So it's not actually about his reputation here, but he's saying, look, you didn't protect my data and therefore my privacy. Talking of data, and we talk a lot with you, Andrew, about AI. There's an interesting story in the Times today saying that, if you were seeking help for depression, it might be that a chatbot could be more effective than your GP.
Absolutely, and they say that chatting to ChatGPT is more effective than chatting to a GP. And the reason, this actually follows on from a story out of the University of California, San Diego, where they basically did exactly the same sort of research. And the reason that they worked out that AI chatbots are better than chatting to your GP is because they can give more detailed answers, they have more time, they can be more empathetic. But also what happens is the artificial intelligence, as you know, I speak around the world and I'm a wonderful advocate for this sort of stuff. Basically, it can work out what ticks your boxes. It knows all about Rosie Wright, and the more you speak to it, the more it can tell you about you. And so from that point of view, there are tremendous opportunities about helping, and not just in mental health, but various other aspects as well.
Final story, Andrew, that we last week on the programme, because there's been so many stories in the papers about this, we had an expert on how you eliminate bed bugs on early breakfast. There is a French hotel that has spent a fairly pricey sum trying to get rid of them. And it seems like Paris, Marseille, places we may all be travelling to, are some of the worst hotspot areas.
It is quite extraordinary. Yes, this particular French hotel has spent €1,500 trying to eradicate the bedbugs. I'm coming to you live from Cannes, where we've got the PV Festival, and I've been presenting the Drama Awards down here again. And it is quite extraordinary. There's quite a few parasites in the entertainment industry. And you might remember 2019, Parasite was the best picture.
Did you check your hotel room when you arrived?
I did. It was okay. No, we're very well spoiled. I think the walls are a bit thin, which is why broadcasting this time of the morning is always interesting. But I think we are free from various bugs.
Okay, free from bed bugs. And your next door neighbours have got an overview of the papers, which is brilliant. Andrew, we have to leave it there just for time. Thank you so much for getting up early for us in France, going through the papers. Really appreciate it.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.